All right, my friends, here we go. This has been a long time coming. We're going to dive into the basics of Ableton, and we're going to try to keep this short and sweet, and I'll kind of walk you through bits and pieces as we go here. So when you open Ableton, if you were to download the trial version, which you have a 30-day authorization to save and play with, and you can do all sorts of fun stuff, post 30 days, I can send you the master file, and you can open it. You can't edit or save. Well, you can edit, but you can't save anything. But you can still play with the master session and get to know it at home, so that when you show up at the church, you're ready to run multi-tracks. Let me just kind of dive into the basics though before we get into the craziness. So this is what you'll see when you open Ableton for the first time. If it's a brand new project, you'll see 2 MIDI tracks and 2 audio tracks, 2 return tracks, and a master bus. So to start with, we don't need the MIDI tracks. Let's get rid of those. And we're going to rename this click, and we're going to do everything capital letters. Ableton rule from Steven. Everything capital letters. We'll hit tab to go to the next one, and we'll hit guide. And then we're going to hold shift, select both of these. Oh, once it catches up, there we go. And I'm going to control G to make a group. And I'm going to label this group click and Q, or guide, or whatever you want to call it. So that group is made. Then I'm going to add another track. Excuse me. I'm going to hit Control T, and I'm going to hit Control T a couple times, add a couple of tracks. I'm going to hold Shift and select all of these, and I can go to Group Tracks or hit Control G, and then I'm going to name this stems, which is the official terminology for audio files that are mixed, bust, or exported out separately. And just for kicks and giggles, I'm going to go through and actually stem 1. Now remember, for each individual song, you can do the best you can to make all of these uniform, so that all of your acoustic guitars, for example, end up on the stem 1 channel, but that doesn't always work out that way. So you just create a collection bus for all of your stem files. You can have as many tracks as you want. The master session right now has up to 13 files, or 13 channels within the stems group. Okay, this is your basic audio setup. Now you can go in and you can color these. You can make them all uniform. You can do a lot of little cool tricks and things like that. Real quick, one thing I want to point out though is if you go to Preferences, which is in File, and you go to where is it at? Where's it at? It's not in here. Oh, that's interesting. Manage File. Okay, well, Options, View. I don't know where it is. All I know is that I use the keyboard shortcut, which is Control, comma. And we choose an audio interface, or if we were to choose like like a headphone output or something. But I'm using a Focusrite USB interface right now, which only has 2 outputs. So I'll show you what we currently do with Prime, which is we run everything in mono. How we do that is we send the click and guide group to the audio to external out, and we're going to send that to 1. And then we're going to send the stems to the master, which we could go external out to, but we're going to send it to the master, and then we're going to send the master to master out too. So it's basically the same thing. It allows us to throw in some fancy processing and things like that. We can put like a mastering compressor on that or whatever. So you have 8 scenes by default. We could go Control I and just create a bunch of scenes. I mean, a master session can have up to like 50 scenes normally. So for this one, we're going to, let's see, I want to do that. I want to rename this guy at the very top, and we're going to make their first song Wonder, which is by Hillsong United. Now, that's the song title. Then we're going to add, underline, and then we'll go key of B. One more underline, and this is the standard. Let me take that space out of there. And then this is the standard arrangement, which means it's not tampered with, it's not altered in any way. And then from there, in parentheses, we want to set the tempo, which I believe is 81.5 BPM. We're going to hit a comma. We'll hit 4-4 or /4 for a time signature, and then we'll end parentheses there. Now what that does is it automates that scene so that when I launch it, you see 120 right here in the tempo, and let's set this to 3-4 time signature. When I launch this, watch what happens. Both of them shift to the tempo and the time signature that I typed in place. So this thing kind of knows, it's intuitive enough to know how you're going to automate a cell or a selection of cells, and then from there we can go in and load our awesome stem folder or stem files. Let's go to master session, and I already did this in the actual master session. I'm just kind of starting from scratch so you can see how I build this. But in the samples, we'll go to multi-track library, Wonder United 177, aka 81.5, I think, if my math is right. And then we've got a couple of folders in here. And this is kind of how the library will break down. We've got the original multi-track folder, which is straight out from multitracks.com, which means their click. Sounds kind of weird. Their guide, which, if I remember, where's that at? Here it is.
1,
Miss Lady.
2,
we don't know her name, but we'll call her
3,
Miss Lady.
4.
And then all of the files that we actually want. But the problem is, let me get rid of this. The problem is you're looking at, upwards of, let's see how many files are in here. At least 20 files in this one song. I don't know about you. I do not want to add 20 channels in my stems group just for one song. I feel like I'm going to make my computer explode. Maybe not. Maybe that's just me. But some of these things can be sub-bounced down. And I'll get into that into the next session here. But like, I can go through and study these tracks and really figure out what needs to be where, and I can condense them down. And usually I am able to get them down to about 13 tracks. That's kind of been the average. So that's kind of step one, is we got to take this through a process to kind of fine tune the files and the full folder of final files that we're going to use with the guide that we want, the click that we want. If we want to add any little cool resurrection pieces like 808s or tambourines or whatever else that we want to put in there. So we take the original multi-tracks and we take it through a process, and then we end up with a specifically systemized labeling of final files, and this gives me I think there's 13 here. So what I do is I'll go ahead and I'll show you how to do this in the next session, but I name by number the first 3 because I want to be able to distinguish those so that I can quickly grab everything else, and it puts all these at the top and I don't have to go fishing through, and I can just drag all those puppies, and I'm going to hit Control to make them horizontal, and it's going to create all the files I need. So I've got a lot more audios here. But if I take all of these and I'm going to zoom over here, boom, and I'm going to just gently maneuver them into the group. Get rid of this. Oh, sorry, let's come back. Okay, and let's come back on them. Then I can drop the click in, I can drop the guide in, and there's a reason there's a bass track labeled 3. If I create a separate bass file, I'm going to move this out of the group here, and I'm going to name it bass. The reason for this is that if a bass player can't make it for some reason, I can still provide a bass track in our rehearsal. Or if a bass player gets sick or has an emergency on Sunday morning, I have a way to send that bass track through its own output if I need to, and I can send it to a bass amp, or I can send it directly to the PA. I can send it through its own XLR, so it's got basically a ghost bass player on stage. I do the same thing with the drums here. I'm going to make a drum channel. This is so in the event that I need it, the drum files can actually be useful. We bought them, we might as well use them. We'll name that drums. Now I don't actually have a drum channel in here. I didn't export that. So this is kind of the start of what looks like a master session here, okay? Let me give you guys a little sample.
1, 2.
So right now click is
1,
coming out
2,
to my right
3,
on the speakers,
4.
and all the tracks are coming out to my left.
Vamp.
So that's typically how we isolate everything on Sunday mornings right now through an 1/8" headphone cable through the Prime app from Loop Community, which is where we'll start when we run Ableton, but eventually we're going to move to audio boxes so that we can run stereo.
Verse.
Stereo is like, I compare it like this. Mono versus stereo with your ears is kind of like having an eye patch on one eye versus seeing with both eyes. You can get used to it, but it becomes exhausting after a while, and it's just not the way God intended us to experience our audible senses. So anyways, there you go. There's session 1, and happy trails.